Good morning, it's good to be with you and thank you for coming. My 10 minutes will focus on the more specific question around are the outer suburbs sustainable with a greater population in the metropolitan area of 6 million, and I'll use Wyndham examples, but I think the issues and opportunities generally apply to all the growth corridors. There's an optimist's answer and there's a pessimist's answer to the question, are we sustainable in the outer suburbs? I'm an optimist. And the optimist says that in theory we can achieve sustainability. I'll mainly focus about transport. There's other elements to sustainability, of course, but to achieve it, we need some paradigm shifts in how we, governments and the community, approach the financing of infrastructure, particularly transport, and we've started to touch on that already. And we need a much greater effort in terms of creating employment in the outer suburbs. The pessimist will say, no, we can't break out of our business as usual paradigm to do what we need to do to make our outer suburbs sustainable. A few key facts about Wyndham. Population of 187,000 at the moment. It's growing by about 10 to 12,000 per annum. There's 70 birth notices or babies born to Wyndham mums each week. Our subdivision approvals have slowed quite markedly, but the pipeline of housing development takes several years, so the population is still pushing through, and the state government is currently headlong in the process of planning for another 90,000 dwellings in Wyndham alone. That will take the population over the next 30 years to over 400,000. Given Bill's earlier comments about all those assumptions, it's nearly the size of Canberra. This next graphic shows you what transport inequity, unfortunately they're supposed to be circular. Oh, they are circular up there, they've just been squeezed on my computer. This is what transport inequity looks like in the outer suburbs. Both of those red circles are an 8 kilometre radius. On the left, you're 8 kilometres from Werribee Station. On the right, you're 8 kilometres from Flinders Street Station. The dark lines are the arterial roads that are managed by the State Road Authority, Vic Roads. You can see the you can see the train infrastructure. I'll talk about the bus infrastructure in a minute. To the northwest of Wyndham is Wyndham Vale. You're nearly 8 kilometres out to the urban growth boundary, which is that green line on the western north side of the Wyndham graphic. And the black dotted line running through it is the regional rail link. So it's nearly 8 kilometres from Werribee out to Wyndham Vale, and it's nearly 8 kilometres from Werribee out to Tarneet, to the north of Werribee. That's the same distance as it is from Flinders Street to Elstonwick, to Camberwell, to Coburg, to Essendon. There's one bus. You've heard the bus service story. There's one bus every 40 minutes. From Werribee out to Tarneet, and one bus out every 40 minutes from Werribee out to Wyndham Vale. It takes 40 to 50 minutes to get from Werribee out there because it catches as many houses as it can by wading its way through all the suburbs rather than running up and down the arterial roads. The 1 mile grid you can see there, which is in terms of some of this planning commentary before, is actually quite a good basis for the bus systems that we need. We can't get Vic Roads to take responsibility for those and duplicate them. They remain a council responsibility. So the ratepayers in the outer suburbs are picking up the cost of maintaining those arterial roads, whereas in the inner suburbs, and you can see down into Elstonwick and Glen Ira and places like that, those roads, the arterial roads are every half a kilometre almost. So that is the sorts of inequity we face in terms of transport. So you wonder why we have an average of 3-car families. Well, if that's the type of public transport you're going to provide, that's what you're going to get. So it is a major challenge in terms of those types of inequities, and it's very stark when you put up photo maps like that. It's interesting on growth. The councils, historically, the outer suburban councils have been growth is good, end of story. That's not the case now. Our council has adopted advocacy strategies and growth management strategies that are saying growth is not a badge of honour. And some of the economic data shows why this is the case as well. In Victoria last year, you might have seen some stories late in the year around our economic output was negative per capita. That means our population is growing faster than our economic output. In Wyndham, that's been the case since 2006-07, when we had a big spike in residential growth. The jobs per thousand, there's a target of one job per household in the growth areas as we try and manage growth going forward. You can see again what's happened there. That equates to 360 jobs per thousand people. We're at 320 in 2006 and we're down to 260. So we're not keeping pace on the economic front, as well as Graham's comments about how we're tracking on the transport front. I'll now quickly talk about a few little myths that I think are worthwhile putting into the arena and the conversation. And I'll run a little quiz. Ask you how many of the metropolitan councils, there's 31 metropolitan councils, how many of them you think grew their population by more than 1% per annum, just 1% each year between 2006 and 2011? So just think about that. How many of the there's 31 metro councils, how many of them do you think grew their population annually by more than 1% over those two intercensal periods? Think about it, less than 25%, do you reckon? 25 to 50%? 50 to 75, more than 75? The answer, barely 25% grew their population by more than 1% per annum. The only councils that did are the growth councils, the City of Melbourne and the City of Maribyrnong. Many of those councils are growing their populations by less than half of 1% per annum. So, if growth is so good, which is what the mantra is, how come it's only the growth areas in Melbourne and Maribyrnong that are actually taking this burden of growth? A couple of other myths while we're on that subject. It's been touched on a bit by Ros a bit earlier as well. Gross population densities in the outer suburbs, because you've got high numbers of families and high numbers of people per dwelling, are in many cases much higher than they are in the middle and the outer ring suburbs. Not only that, the housing densities you've heard about, the new planning is coming through at 17 lots per hectare. What they're doing to the backyards is another story, but there are high levels of population densities, and so the conclusion is that it's not housing density is a bit of a furphy in terms of public transport provision in the outer suburbs. The second one is that a number of our middle and inner ring suburbs haven't reached the populations they had in the immediate post-war period. So again, conclusions around the issues around infill developments in the middle and middle ring suburbs. It's not a case of the drama's being driven by population overload in a number of cases. So the next thing is, and this is why I come to the optimist story. This next graphic shows why there is some cause for being optimistic. Oh, this doesn't show it, sorry. This is what we've got. I've got another one after this one. This is the issue about arterial roads, and I talked about the 1 mile grid and the fact we've got to get to arterial road duplications, and you've got to have priorities for buses along those arterial road duplications. And if you're at the 1 mile grid, or 1.6 kilometres, there's a lot we can do. But this is the northern part of Wyndham, and this is the sort of issue we've got in terms of just trying to get the roads duplicated and lack of government commitment to arterial road funding. Decent bicycle networks, that poor guy on the bike you can see there, that's the sort of challenge we've got even in the arterial road space. It's just a function of the number of houses that are being put in there. This is the graphic the reason that we've got more cause for optimism. It shows, again, you've got the urban growth boundary along the left-hand side, up the northwestern side of the map. At the northern end, where the pink bubbles, the pink stops, it actually goes into industrial development between Wyndham and Melton. What this shows is every railway station that's planned on the regional rail link and the Werribee line station, and plots a 1 kilometre in the purple and a 3 kilometre radius in the pink. It shows that about 90%, 80 to 90%, kind of 400 of the 450,000 people that Wyndham could ultimately accommodate could be within 3 kilometres of a railway station. That's about a half-hour walk for someone who's reasonably fit. So, and if we had that, plus the 1 mile grid with decent bus networks on the arterial road network, then we have the basis for a sustainable transport system in the outer suburbs. So that's the cause, as I said, for why I can be optimistic about this. Challenge is what we need to actually deliver on this plan. The first is the Metro 1 project, the Metro Rail Capacity project that Graham talked about. If that comes in, we can get from 5 trains an hour on the AM peak, on the peak periods in Werribee, up to 15 trains an hour. That's a huge uplift. We can get to 8 trains an hour when regional rail link comes through, because the Geelong trains are now no longer running up and down the Werribee line. We need another 6 railway stations. 4 on the regional rail link, and another 2 on the Werribee line. Of those, 5 appear in metropolitan rail development plans that are scheduled for the next 30 years. It's too long, but they are in a plan. So we do need one extra southwest of Werribee that's not in the plan at the moment, but at least they're there. However, we can't be building them at $80 million a pop, which is what Williams Landing Station cost. It's just ridiculously expensive, and there's got to be ways of affording railway stations at substantially less cost. If you've driven down past Point Cook and seen this thing, it looks like the pedestrian overpass was built for tanks. It's just bizarre, but there's got to be a way of building those railway stations cheaper. We talked about the substantial increase in bus services. They need to be much more frequent. They need to be up and down the main roads. It's interesting, when they opened Williams Landing Station, they changed the bus frequencies through Point Cook. They actually put them up and down the main roads. They ran them at 22-minute frequencies. Hallelujah. I mean, it's not 40 minutes. It's not they don't meet every second train. They don't meet every train, but it's an improvement. The bus patronage has gone up anecdotally between 50 and 300%. If we could get the data out of PTV, it'd be fantastic. But that's what's happened. And they actually ran the buses into some of the new suburbs where the houses are still being built. That's what's got to happen if you're going to give people opportunities to have more to manage on one vehicle per household rather than multiple vehicles per household. We've heard the comment about the East-West link. The West link, if you're going to grow Melton and Wyndham by over 500,000 people and you're relying on one major crossing, the West Gate, it's not going to work. You're going to projected container growth out of the port's going from 2.2 to 8 million TEUs. You can't deal with that without some capacity to get in and out of the port and back to the ring road and the distribution centres. And the most simple way of that is a tunnel under Footscray that connects back up to either the Old Geelong Road or a new freeway reservation out to the ring road. It's just, I think, a simple fact that the amount of population growth and residential growth, that element of it, is something that I think just has to be dealt with. And then we've got to deal with grade separations and finding new constructive ways to fund and finance those grade separations is going to be critical. So that's one cause for optimism. The other cause for optimism, which is slightly, comes back to Ross's point about the broader social and economic circumstances. The other point for us at Wyndham is that there is the East Werribee Employment Precinct. It's a huge piece of land that's, I think it's 5 or 6 times the size of the CBD. Planned for 60,000 jobs in there. There's 3,000 in there already. They're in health, they're in science, they're in education and higher education. That's what you've got to build on. That plus 30,000 jobs around the other activity centres means that we do have a target of 1 job per household. So we think that there is the capacity to get there. So in conclusion, my comment about the metropolitan plan is, if we don't have a plan to finance and deliver the infrastructure required in the metropolitan plan, then we don't have a plan. We've actually got a vision. We have the vision of what the city might look like at 6 million, and it can be sustainable. But we do need sustained pressure and campaigning to get central governments to face up to the financing issues via a range of mechanisms, and we need community education and community support to accept changes in how we have to price this to pay for it. Thank you.